Hi, everyone. Welcome to Advisix as a Service Solutions webinar. We are going to give it just another minute. I know we've got a lot of people coming in, so stay tuned and we'll get started in just another minute. Okay, we are right at time. I just want to say hello and welcome to everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Amy Hashcheck, National Program Director at Advisix, overseeing our as-a-service practice. We're excited to share a lot of great content with you surrounding our as-a-service and more specifically HPE GreenLake. Mitch Brown, our Director of Engineering, will be leading this discussion. Mitch leads the engineering team for our as-a-service practice. He is responsible for leading our team of engineers to provide enablement and engineering services to the company for all as-a-service opportunities. If you have any questions during our session, please feel free to use our Q&A function. Mitch, I will pass it off to you.
All right, thank you, Amy. Let's dive right in. So I've got a list of topics here. This is not an order, but this is just a high-level overview, and I think we sent this out in the invitation. But basically, I'm going to talk about our why as a service for IT infrastructure, generally speaking, is exploding right now. Talk a little bit about GreenLake. Not going to go really deep. Just want to provide an initial introduction for people who are not familiar with it and how we leverage it in our solutions. We're going to talk about cloud outcomes versus customer expectations. We find this is a really big issue for a lot of customers, and I want to make sure everybody's aware of some of those. We'll talk about the service value framework that we provide as we develop as a service solutions for our customers. And then at kind of wrapping up, we'll talk about some of the financial and operational benefits of unit-based metering, which is a core component of all as a service solutions. So let's get started. I thought we might have a little fun. One of the things that I find interesting is whenever I talk to customers about cloud solutions, I try to ask this question: what does cloud mean to you? And I get a lot of different answers, and many of them are conflicting. And the question that kept coming back to my mind as I started to try and put together a summary of the situation is, why do we keep asking the same question? What is the cloud? Now, you can ask a dictionary. The American Heritage Dictionary gives you definitions of clouds that have nothing to do with IT. So this background picture here is a representation I got from NASA, which is it's the Cloud Nebula. It's a pretty famous nebula somewhere in space, but according to the dictionary, the word nebula means a diffuse cloud of interstellar dust or gas, and I thought that's rather humorous. It's just as redundant and just as confusing as cloud. Everybody has an idea of what it is, and we see a picture like this, we recognize kind of what it is, but it's hard to describe. It's indistinct, and it can't really be put in a neat little box and made consistent. So I thought to kick this off, we'll put. Well, I've got some quotes. I want to put together some quotes from various people and publications explaining what cloud is, And I started with Google and found that if you put in a search for cloud in Google, it generates so many results it's functionally unusable. So I said, well, let's use ChatGPT. And I wrote this: provide a list of quotes from people explaining what cloud is. After a few seconds, it came back with this: certainly, here's some quotes, and it gave two. And they're reasonable quotes, nothing wrong with this, but it paused then for like 15 seconds or so, and then it added one more. Now, I just found that rather humorous. Somehow, in asking ChatGPT to give me some quotes from people explaining what cloud is, it managed to, I guess, break its own terms of service. So that wasn't very helpful either. So I decided to put together a little slideshow to give you an introduction to how Advisix understands the world of cloud and how our as a service models relate to our customer needs. So here goes, watch this. This is the definition that I've been using for as a service, for cloud in general, to differentiate this whole world of the opportunity of public, private, hybrid cloud, as a service, all of these technologies and concepts. At the end of the day, in our experience, you can use all the cloud technologies you want. You still may never quite achieve that nebulous idea that you have in your head. To truly be successful in this world, we need to start with the outcome. And this shouldn't be just a technology outcome like self-service IT. So what? The key is to start with the outcome in terms of what impacts your business. Like maybe you need to have your business units to be able to consume IT services at the click of a button without having to allocate most of my IT staff to manage, maintain, and support it. That's an example of infrastructure as a service. As we work with our customers to characterize these desired outcomes in business terms, that's what enables us to design as a service solutions that actually achieve those outcomes. The alternative that we find is a lot of offerings in the market today that are structured as a service solutions. The providers define them very clearly. This is what we provide as our as a service solution. And it then becomes a tool that you can consume, but it doesn't necessarily connect to your outcome. It's kind of like distributed network services or phone services. There's a last mile problem. Your provider may bring the service that you're looking for close to you, but somehow you have to do that last bit of work to connect that service to your business and make sure that you're achieving the outcome that you're trying to get out of that tool. And what we're trying to do is to work with our customers to understand the business objectives, the true outcome that the customer and the business wants, and structure it in an as a service solution that actually delivers that outcome as an SLA. So, to take the next step to orient ourselves in understanding the success and growth of as a service, let's look at some of the concepts that underlie all of this that I think are very important for us to understand. The first thing is that cloud is not ultimately about technology. It is a set of concepts that are designed to remove friction from IT. Common examples of this: most of these as a service solutions will have some form of on-demand self-service. They'll have broad network access, making it easy for various business units to take advantage of these services. There's resource pooling that allows us to take advantage of scale as an organization grows or as a service provider provides service to more customers, perhaps in a public cloud model. That resource pooling allows for cost optimization at scale. You have rapid elasticity. You want to be able to grow your infrastructure when you need it and you want to have measured service so that you know exactly what you're using and be able to map it back to the why. What is the business unit using? What does it cost to maybe start a new project, because you have visibility to all of those things. Those are kind of the underlying core concepts that almost all of these solutions are built on, again, to drive friction from IT. And this gets us to a key piece. A lot of times you will hear, oh, but the cloud is going to be more expensive. Well, that may be true, but it never claimed that it wouldn't be. You see, the promise of cloud is speed and agility, not cost. This is crucial for us to understand. I have a customer, they're an entertainment company. And we were doing an assessment for them a number of years ago. And when I was interviewing their marketing department, I asked them what was the biggest challenge that they have with IT internally. And they said it takes far too long to get new projects going. When we dug into that, they explained to me that the issue is that when they see an opportunity with regard to marketing their entertainment products, they come up with an idea and that gives them an edge. If it's a successful idea, and they deploy it, they might have a market lead in that area for a couple of months. And so they, at the time, were looking at these marketing projects and say they want the average life cycle of that marketing idea, or they believe the window of opportunity is about 6 months, 4 to 6 months. And they said the problem they have that it generally takes about 3 months at a minimum to get internal IT to spin up the resources they need to deploy that project. So they've lost half of the available window that they had to be able to take advantage of a market opportunity. There's no amount, well, no amount's a little broad, but you can see in that example that what is needed is speed and agility, not cost, because simply looking at cost itself, the cost to deploy that project isn't enough to determine whether it's worth going after the project. What they need is a speed and agility, speed to deploy and the agility to be able to say very quickly, hey, this project isn't working it. Let's shut it down and redeploy those resources some other way as quickly as possible. And those are the kinds of things that these as a service solutions are driving toward, giving customers the ability to pay for what they're using, at least to some degree, uh, and be able to grow and shrink and flex with their market and opportunity demands. A report from Gartner published last year describes it this way. It says that these cloud concepts are effectively a necessity to drive innovation and disrupt competition. And they show this model where most organizations are slowly moving toward this model that I call the agile enterprise, where the agile enterprise leverages cloud as a business necessity because they need to be able to disrupt their competition and they need to be able to rapidly pursue opportunities for innovation. And most of the world isn't there yet. Most organizations are just barely beginning to engage and leverage cloud and as a service uh, solutions. At the end of the day, though, everybody wants the Amazon experience. We've been conditioned that no patience is required. We need to have free same day delivery. And that is something that particularly the public cloud offers. But unfortunately, the public cloud often isn't realistic, at least not for every use case. Many organizations have a variety of regulatory requirements. There's data sovereignty issues. There's cost and scalability issues. There's locality issues, performance requirements. There's all sorts of things that can get in the way of just saying, hey, we're going to throw everything in the public cloud and we're going to make it work great. And what we've found is that the answer in most cases, and we believe that the future truly is a mix of both public and private clouds. And we call that the hybrid cloud model. Now, we stay with this term cloud. We don't talk about this as being a mix of traditional infrastructure and cloud, because whether you do it as a private model or a public model, you still need those core concepts of removing friction from IT, building and having those ecosystems that support your ability to transform into an agile enterprise. Furthermore, what we notice is that when people deploy cloud solutions, there are often gaps that they encounter um, once things are running. So when you put together this cloud solution, especially if it's in the public cloud, there's almost always these situations that come up after you're up and running and you realize, oh, we didn't think about that. But now you've got a bit of a problem. If if the gap is something that was never articulated as a requirement, it can be really hard to go back and plug that gap to fix that problem. And especially when it comes to things like security or resilience, that could be a train wreck. I mean, we've worked with customers who have moved a bunch of infrastructure to the public cloud, and and they said, um, what happens if this public cloud instance dies? What happens if this region goes down for a couple of days? We got to build that disaster recovery plan. Oh, look, this as a service solution didn't incorporate a disaster recovery model. We need, just like if we were doing this in private, we needed to account for that. That's that's one example. Another example is you think about people who move to Microsoft 365. So many of us use Microsoft 365. You're using that right now with Teams. But those of us who consume it now, it's a true software as a service solution. Microsoft provides a lot of inherent data protection in that. They replicate their data stores, but they don't do backups. So if somebody deletes something or a user leaves and their data is deleted, and 2 months later, some regulatory analysis comes in and says, hey guys, you weren't supposed to delete that. You're going to need to pull that back. If you don't have backups of your Microsoft 365 environment, you won't get it back. That's going to be a problem. It's amazing how many customers we work with, even today, who are on Microsoft 365 and they don't realize they don't have any backups if they haven't planned for it. Ultimately, the point I'm trying to make is that moving to cloud is hard. It takes work. And sometimes when the apps are up and running, the pressure comes off and it's easy to forget about checking for and plugging those kinds of gaps. Sometimes you don't find out about them until you fall into the gap and it really hurts your business. So that's one of the things that we try and do as a consultative engagement organization. We want to work with our customers, as I've said, to identify the outcome that the customer wants and make sure that we bring as much visibility to the gaps and the risks to make sure that all of these pieces are discussed and we can articulate the outcome and then develop and deploy the as a service solution that truly meets the customer's needs. So our view is that the as a service solutions we provide go beyond a product component model to one that delivers a consistent provider managed experience. The experience is, what is it like for the people in your organization when an outcome driven as a service solution is put in place? And that means we have to think about the experience of the various people in the organization who interact with that solution. How does it affect the end users in the lines of business? How does it change their experience in interacting with IT? How does how does it affect the IT staff? Does it make their life better? Are they able to focus more on line of business opportunities, or do they spend all their time maintaining the as a service solution or plugging the gaps in that last mile? How does that affect the finance organization? These are kind of the questions that we want to engage upfront and understand what's that outcome and how is it going to be experienced. So to do that, we use an as a service kind of a model, and there's somebody developed this years ago. I have no idea who, but it's a great model, and it's the concept of looking at this through the eyes of a pizza consumer. If we think of pizza, that hopefully all of us enjoy, we can look at this model in somewhat the same way. If I make pizza at home, I am responsible for the entire stack, from the cheese to the dough to the oven to the utilities to the drinks and the dining table and chairs that you sit on when you eat it. But there's another model. We've got a place down the road from us where I can go and get take and bake. It's ready, it's in the freezer. Great pizza. All I have to do is stick it in my oven and put it on my table. So it's a step in that direction. There are some components that are provided, in a sense, as a service. I am doing unit-based consumption. I'm not paying, I'm not looking at it in terms of, well, what's the cost of all the components? What's the cost of the electric to have pizza, or the cost of the oven, or all of those things? It's just, hey, I'm paying by the pizza. And the next option is one that adds more services. It's delivery. I'm still paying by the pizza, but more is provided. It's cooked for me. It's delivered to me. And now all I'm providing is the table and chairs and the drinks. Now the last model is the dining out model, where everything is provided. I'm still paying for the pizza, but more services provided in that model. That's exactly how the IT as a service model works. Legacy IT approach, it's all up to us. We have to design everything in that stack, from the data center to the applications. Now, we generally have described these as a service solutions in categories: infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. And this is kind of how they lay out. Uh, I'd say the most common one is infrastructure as a service, where we're getting the data center, the networking, storage, and servers are essentially all put together. Sometimes there's a virtualization layer involved. Sometimes you have to provide that. That's kind of a little bit of a fuzzy line. For example, if you go to Amazon and just swipe your card to get a VM, you're getting the virtualization layer. But if you want to go to Amazon and get machines to run VMware, you can do that. But then you're bringing your licenses for virtualization to the table. So there's flexibility within the models, but it should be obvious how much of this we're consuming. But we see in those models that kind of pooled resources, the ability to do self-service, all of those pieces are integral to a true IaaS solution. Going beyond that is the platform as a service. A simple one to understand there is something like a database, where, for example, most of the public cloud providers have database services that you simply interact with by way of traditional database APIs, and everything under that stack is provided for you. And then the similar with software as a service, whether it's some kind of maybe SAP. SAP has a software as a service solution, or so many of them that are provided. Well, we talked about Microsoft 365. That's a software as a service solution, obviously. Now, what differentiates what we do is when you consume out of say a public provider, whether it's infrastructure or software as a service, the pooling that gets done is done by those providers. And if you have multiple providers, you're now talking about different pools underneath all of these solutions. Underneath every software as a service solution are the components in an infrastructure as a service solution. Now, that may not be broken out, but they're there. And one of the things that happens is, perhaps you could think back to a model that was very common 10, 15 years ago in healthcare. And this is where maybe a hospital would say, hey, I need to buy a new MRI machine, and I need it to come with a full vendor supported software package and solution. And that would come with the MRI machine and a whole bunch of servers and storage to handle all the imaging and software to work with that. And all of it's provided by whoever that provider is. Now, granted, that wasn't done as a service, but the point is, that infrastructure then couldn't be shared. It couldn't be leveraged if there was excess capacity to do other things with that, because it was a dedicated model. And while these cloud-based solutions are shared resource, the reality is the benefits of optimization in that shared resource model primarily go to the the service provider. Now, what we do is we start with one of our providers, like HPE with GreenLake, and we build an infrastructure as a service solution that is essentially a private solution. And that can be put wherever it needs to be. It could be in your data center, it could be in a hosted facility, but all of that can be structured in such a way that you're still billing based on your metering. The metering values or units that you want as a customer. So let me introduce HPE GreenLake a little bit. Uh, what they do is, we all know HPE sells an awful lot of products. They're very best in class from whether it's networking, computing, storage, and workload management. They have a lot of good products. And what GreenLake allows us to do is essentially take the stuff of IT that HPE provides and put it together in solutions that are quite customized for specific customer use cases to provide these infrastructure as a service solutions. And then they also offer some software as a service offerings that we could build into that. So one of the great examples is, imagine that you have a highly robust data center infrastructure, whether it's deployed with infrastructure as a service or not. Let's say you have a production data center and a DR data center, and you have designed that infrastructure and it works really well. It provides all your needs. You've got replication, backup, and disaster recovery plans, all that stuff is done. But then what do you do for your edges? Sometimes you've got branches that have a couple of computers there and maybe a little storage. How do you back that up? How do you provide disaster recovery for that? Well, that's one of the things that you can do with GreenLake's subscription focused platforms. They have things like backup as a service and DR as a service that are tailored on a VM basis, where you can simply put a little VM that manages the ecosystem out in a branch, and you just subscribe your VMs to it, and it's charged on a per unit basis, and it provides backups and disaster recovery that can be recovered in one of HPE's cloud locations. That's a really high level summary of what HPE does with GreenLake. But the point is that both of these, whether it's consuming the IT equipment, for example, that has a pay-per-use model, or subscribing to some of these software capabilities that layer on top of it, we use solutions like GreenLake to create this foundation for a holistic as a service solution for our customers. And the reason we have to structure it this way is because, kind of like I mentioned earlier, you can buy an HPE GreenLake solution fairly straightforwardly from anybody that provides HPE, but you don't necessarily have that connection to that actual business outcome. There's still that last mile that you have to take the tools that are provided in these solutions like HPE GreenLake and get that to actually deliver the outcome that your organization is looking for. And that's where our as a service model comes in. We tailor our solutions to each customer's unique business needs, and we focus on the business outcomes rather than just on the components. So let's go back to our as a service model, our pizza stack model, if you will, and let's take a look at how some of this could work. If we think about it in terms of how we deploy an as a service model in a traditional data center or a traditional or a hosted facility, for example, we would leverage something like GreenLake and deploy into the data center the networking, storage, servers, and again, with the same kind of, depends on your use case. Maybe we provide the virtualization stack, maybe we don't. But you have that foundation that is that infrastructure as a service solution. And then we build on top of that the components and the services that are needed to actually create the infrastructure as a service solution that meets the customer's outcomes. And while that then provides a platform that each customer gains that benefit of pooled resources within their own organizations, we can deploy platform as a service on top of that. So if there's a particular use case where he says, you know what, I don't want to have database experts, Or I have people who know enough about databases to maintain our databases from a business application perspective, but I don't want to have to try and find those database engineers who can figure out all the tiny little details of managing and maintaining and controlling and performance tuning and all that sort of thing. These are things that Advisix can do because we have those resources, and we can build that services model so that you can consume the databases as a service with your own pooled on-prem or hosted infrastructure. And the same thing works on a software as a service model. We would call this more of a workload model, where one of the common ones is a customer is moving toward cloud native applications that fit very nicely into this as a service model, but for regulatory reasons they're doing it private, right? So they're moving these applications from legacy application stacks into these new modernized stacks. And what we then see is customers will go, well, I have this old workload. It's got to be retired in 3 or 4 years. We need to take our staff and get them focused on the business applications that we're building that will eventually replace this. We need someone to provide us the services to manage this existing legacy stack, gaining the benefits of the infrastructure as a service platform underneath. But we need to flip that to a workload as a service model so that we can consume it as it goes to retirement. That's just a model. It could be something that you don't retire. It could be just some workload that you say, we need to bring this application in house. We need somebody else to manage it because we're not going to have the staff to do it. This is what we can do. We can do it with this benefits of a common resource pool that is essentially housed and owned in a sense by the customer, even though it is billed at a meter. And you have the same type of physical and access controls that you would have as if you owned the equipment itself. And we can add whatever components we need to make sure that we're delivering to the outcome. So especially in the workload model, but really drilling all the way down to any of these models, whether it's infrastructure or platform, workload, whatever, is we can provide a basic help desk. We typically do actually, but we can also say, hey, how about an infrastructure as a service, a basic foundational platform that is actually deployed in multiple data centers with pre-designed disaster recovery, backup, and restore that's fully managed for you. So now you just have to consume out of that private cloud the resources that your particular project needs with the attributes that you need. Because you could now have a self-service that says, hey, I need to grab a VM. Boom, I'm going to grab a VM and it's got a check mark that says, does this need DR? Yeah, it needs DR. So you check the box and it gets deployed. We can build that solution for our customers. Do you need to wrap security operations around all of this infrastructure? That's another piece that we can add. We can add, we typically leverage tools like ServiceNow and Morpheus, but again, that's flexible. If you've already got an infrastructure that you've built for infrastructure automation, we can tie into most major tools in the industry to do that. If you already have ServiceNow, we can connect into your infrastructure. If you don't have ServiceNow, we can build this in so that you're leveraging our ServiceNow infrastructure as we deploy these solutions. At the end of the day, it's all about building that outcome-based service that leverages self-service capabilities and automation to provide the speed and agility that we're looking for in our cloud solutions. Now, while we design that foundation, what I want to explain is that there is an element here that I want to try and make it not nebulous. We have this principle in IT called keeping the lights on. When you are managing a traditional infrastructure as an IT organization, you're going to have people assigned tasks that do not directly relate to driving new business value for your organization. I call that the keeping the lights on activities. And they're not exciting. They're just things we have to get done. And unfortunately, those are the things that tend to fall through the cracks at times. Simple example, I've got done I've got customers that I've worked with for 20 plus years where I've been through 4 or 5 data center refreshes. And it's amazing to me how frequently I hear the same story. I say, how's your DR working? Well, it worked when we put it in 4 years ago, but we didn't maintain it because something happened. The process broke. We always had too much on our plate to actually get that maintained, right? See, these are the challenges. It's very difficult in any organization to maintain things that don't have that direct immediate business value. It's kind of like security, where security is something we all have to do and it's incredibly important, but it's really hard to describe the value of the work that we're doing in business terms unless we get hacked. Then it's easy. But if we haven't ever gotten hacked and we're just trying to keep all those gaps plugged, it's really hard to contextualize and relate the value of the work that we're doing to the line of business. Now, when we get into an as a service solution that is truly outcome based, it completely changes that paradigm, especially when we're dealing with something, a component where we are providing a service that aligns in that space where it's not core business, but it's something that supports your core business. At that point, when we're providing the as a service solution to meet that outcome, well, it kind of becomes our core business. And when it becomes our core business, we have all the right incentives to bring to the table that cycle of continuous improvement. And when we talk about things like meter-based billing, the idea of, hey, maybe it's a storage system and you're paying for it in cost per gig. Well, there's two elements. There's the cost of the hardware and that kind of infrastructure components, but you've also got the service costs of managing it and patching it and all of that stuff that are included in typical as a service solutions. But what we really want to bring to the table is this idea that as we go through our continuous improvement cycle and we optimize what we're doing in that as a service model on your behalf. When we optimize, we have the ability to compete better in the market, and that helps bring your costs down. So we see customers who have been with us in our as a service solutions who find that over time, the cost per unit goes down. A customer might grow and end up spending more, but their cost per unit tends to decline. And this is a transformational concept in IT. That gets us to that is this concept of as a service metered billing. Now, when we do as a service metered billing, like I said, maybe cost per gig for the storage and cost per core or something. When it comes to compute, there's a variety of ways of doing it. We have the flexibility to do either unified or discrete service billing. So this comes into play where, let's say we're using HPE GreenLake to provide the foundational elements of the infrastructure as a service components, but maybe we're doing a particular workload as a service. Now, we could take all the service elements that we're providing to meet that business outcome. We can kind of add them all up and we can structure them so that you, as the end customer, are paying a defined cost per gig of storage, cost per unit for compute, for example, in that workload. And the costs per unit, cost per gig, cost per whatever, those include all the services necessary to meet the defined outcome of that as a service model. Or you could say to us, we don't need that level of precision, if you will, in bringing it down just to a cost per unit. So maybe you say, I just want to know what the cost per unit is for maybe the cost of the storage, the managed storage component underneath, and the managed compute resources underneath, and the managed network resources underneath. And then I want a separate cost that's maybe done by user for the applications. So we can do it either in that unified way or the discrete service billing. We have the flexibility to build those billing models to the specifications of each customer. And we got to do that on the entities consumed. And because the specific outcomes our customers may need for financial or regulatory other reasons, they may need to line up these meters and identify the units that they want to be charged in order to align them with other business needs. Another thing that we can do with these solutions is we can do workload and department summarization. I've been in the industry for 35 years, and things like chargeback and look back are always things people want, but rarely seem to deploy and or maintain. And one of the interesting things about as a service solutions is that we can't bill you if we don't have this level of granularity. So it's always built into the solution, and that gives you the ability to do this workload and department summarization. And we have the ability to do it in many cases for you. So within the management ecosystem that we have for infrastructure as a service solutions, for example, we can tag things like VMs and storage entities, or just tag the VMs, and the system can identify all the storage that's attached to a VM. And then we can say, oh, this particular tag is this department or this project. And then we can provide, as part of our monthly billing, a summary of what each department costs. We can provide you that detail. We can do it at billing level. You can do it yourself. But effectively, it does two things. It gives you an understanding of, or at least your finance organization, an understanding of what the resources that each department or project uses, what it costs, and that can then be compared to the the financial value of those departments. It's a much more granular way of helping the lines of business understand the value of what they're bringing to the organization, and helps the organization focus its priorities and its resources on the things that are driving business value. Now, if you've ever swiped your credit card on Amazon and done a little tinkering, you know that it can get expensive really quickly. And one of the things that customers will do is they'll look at the workloads that they deploy up in the cloud, and you do some level of optimization, but at some point you're going to look at it and say, you know what, at any given time, we're going to have a minimum amount of resources that are consumed. And what you do is you do a commitment to that cloud provider that says, okay, if I commit to this minimum level over 3 years or 4 years, give me a discount, right? And that's basically what all of the public cloud providers will do. And that's true in these private cloud solutions or hybrid cloud solutions as well. We build in this concept of a commitment term because that allows us to drive the pricing down, because we have that commitment over time. So that leads us to the next concept, what we call a reserve, the reserve portion. So the simple example is storage. Maybe you have a need for, let's say, 30 or 40 terabytes of storage, or maybe it's 30 terabytes, but sometimes during peak seasons you have some temporary projects going on and you're going to spike that up to 40 or 50 terabytes, and then it's going to come back down after you do cleanup, after things calm down. And maybe that cycle continues. So what we can do is we can build that infrastructure solution where we deploy on your premises enough storage to cover that buffer, but we have the commitment term and the commitment rate, or the reserve, sized to that minimum. And that means you're going to pay a specific monthly rate that gets you maybe 30 terabytes. And that monthly rate is going to be there. I mean, if you go down and you're only using 20 terabytes, you're still going to pay that reserve rate. But it gives you that flexibility to not have to pay for the units that are sitting there in that times when you're not using them. So this leads us to some of the financial benefits of these solutions. It gives us much better ability to align your IT expenses with revenue. Everybody knows the pain of what happens when you budget for a refresh every 3 or 4 years, and now you got to figure out how to split your refreshes up. Maybe you do compute 1 year and storage the next year, and DR compute the next year, and DR storage the next year. That creates a hassle. It creates a hassle of the fact that some percentage of your IT staff spends a rather large chunk of their year every year just dealing with and managing the refresh cycle, disposition of equipment, all of that sort of stuff, and managing the budget spike that occurs because it's very difficult to get these things even, means that your IT expenses go up and down from year to year to year, and it drives financial people nuts. When we move into these as a service solutions, those expenses now get aligned with revenue. Instead of taking a big hit that then you depreciate over however many years, or you use it over however many years and then take a big hit again, you're just paying a monthly bill. No upfront capital, no upfront expense, just monthly expenses. And it gives you that ability to do the department accountability, to make sure that your departments are using resources wisely, and to be able to go back to those guys that never delete the old stuff and say, look, this is what it's costing you to keep it. Is it worth it? And it allows you to make those business cases much better. It gives you the ability to do forecasting. It gives you much greater time to market because you have resources on the floor to grow into. Um, and so forth. I mentioned declining unit costs. That's a big factor of this over time. There's two parts of it. I use the storage example where we say you use 30, maybe 40 at certain times, but maybe we put 50 terabytes on the floor. Well, what happens if you grew enough that you need to grow that, and maybe even grow that reserve rate, so that now you're going to need 100 terabytes on the floor to manage your variable? Well, what we find is that when you have an ecosystem on the floor that's been there for 2 years on, say, a 5-year committed term, the costs of technology tend to go down over time, such that when 2 years in we have to grow that, we are confident, and our experience shows that we're able to add the hardware needed to grow that unit at a later time at a lower cost, which means that as you grow the resources on the floor, the unit costs for that resource tend to go down. And then the second part of that is, when you come to the end of term, you don't have this hard stop like you do with a lease or an annual support contract renewal. What happens is you can continue to pay your current rate, or you can say, hey, I want to continue using this for another year, and then we can work with all of our providers under the covers, and we can offer you a discount for that additional committed term. Or we can look at the impact of new technology and new capabilities, and we can say, hey, if we do a refresh for you, now the new unit cost is going to be different. And our experience shows that it's almost always lower. If you stick with the same type of capabilities, it's always going to be lower. And that allows your finance people to see this idea of, wait, instead of seeing costs of business in IT continuously growing, I can see that the unit costs of supporting my business units tend to decline over time. It changes the paradigm of the executive view of IT in many organizations. In some cases, we can offer balance sheet flexibility. Now, in the public cloud, you never get to own your assets at all. And so it's always an OPEX. It's always treated as OPEX on your balance sheet. When we deal with private clouds, especially leveraging HPE's GreenLake capabilities, those resources can be structured so that you can put them wherever you need them on the balance sheet. They are still no cash up front, pay as you go solutions, but you can record them on your balance sheet in whatever manner makes the most sense for you. We've got a customer that decided to pay their reserve in one lump sum at the beginning of every year and treat it as capital. And then the overages for when they consume more than their reserve, they wanted to treat monthly as OPEX. These are some flexibilities that we have with these many of these as a service solutions that the public cloud simply cannot do. So some of the things you can say no to, you can get rid of, as we discussed, IT budget spikes. You won't have to deal with support agreements and renewals. You will reduce or eliminate project delays because you've got resources in-house to be able to start new projects immediately. You can eliminate overbuying. A lot of times what we find is when somebody says, I'm going to buy a new something and I'm going to expect that to stay for 5 years, you're going to do that magic 8-ball trick of guessing how much resource you need to cover you for 5 years. And in storage, for example, maybe you get a great price because you bought 500 terabytes, but today you only use 200 terabytes. And you bought 500 because you think if everything goes well and your business continues to grow and there are no horrible surprises in life, maybe you'll use that. But here's the reality. If you look at the cost per gig of that 200 gig that you're using, it's 2.5x what it says on the bottom line because you're not using that storage that you bought. And these solutions allow you to avoid that overbuying. We want to keep that reserve rate reasonable so it manages to hold that flexible part of your usage, but we also have the ability to grow it at reasonable times. And the reason this works is all those upgrades, the services around upgrading and maintaining that infrastructure are built in. So you as the customer don't have to spend the time and effort to manage those. You don't have to take time away from your staff and all of the things that they have to focus on to manage. Oops, hey, look, we grew. Now that means we have to add some more storage or add some more servers. Well, that's where in an as a service solution that's scalable, like the ones that we provide, we're able to include that in the solution. So we coordinate it with you. We work with your project managers, but we do that work for you. Another thing that happens with this is you don't actually own the assets during the use of an as a service solution, so you're not having to deal with depreciation. And in many cases, many states do not charge sales tax on services uh, products. So this allows you to save even further because you're not having to pay sales taxes. And in states that charge asset taxes, that's also something that can be avoided. And if you are not keeping this equipment, the equipment that's associated with the service in your own data centers, we can choose data centers that are located in states that do not incur asset taxes, which also helps. Now, operationally, I've given you some implications here that I've already mentioned, like the implementations and migrations are frequently built into the projects. Infrastructure as a service, sometimes people don't. If we're deploying VMware as a service solution, inside an infrastructure as a service solution, a lot of customers will just say, I don't need you to build in management support or migration support because I know how to use vMotion and make that happen. Don't need any help. But all of those things are options as we tailor these solutions to our specific customer needs and outcomes. I mentioned the embedded refresh model from a financial perspective, but the other value of that refresh model is, again, we do it. You're not allocating your staff time on whatever refresh cycle rate you guys have to deal with. But the other thing is part of this includes equipment disposition. When equipment is retired, that is done with sustainable business practices, all upfront, described, documented in our as a service solutions. We have the capability, because of the tooling, to provide capacity planning and forecasting as part of our services. That's done with pretty much every infrastructure solution we do. Also, we include software and firmware patching and upgrades. We all know lots of times software and firmware patching, man, that can take a back seat because, applications in production don't like change. And we also find that, especially on the infrastructure level, it's like if it isn't broken, don't fix it. Spend your time focusing on the lines of business. Well, as I mentioned before, when it's an as a service solution, it is our as a service. It is our primary line of business, and it's important for us to keep those upgrades up to date because that maintains your security profile. It minimizes outages. These are all things that we have the incentives to make sure they get done. Um, Obviously, when it comes to upgrades and things like that, we do coordinate those with the customer for risk mitigation and management. Um, I also mentioned that we build automation into these solutions, and we can tie those in. We can do automation projects as well to help you operationalize other business processes that relate to our as a service solutions. So ultimately, what this comes to is that we believe that the future is hybrid cloud. in any organization, as you pursue this agile enterprise journey, you will have applications that actually run best in the public cloud. You will have applications that run best in a private cloud. And so our goal is to design solutions that expect to be hybrid. So our designs will have the concepts of data and app portability intrinsic to the way we design them. They may not be included up front based on your requirements, but we won't be boxing ourselves into a corner. And as you pursue this journey, you're going to find, as we've said, that there are going to be problems along the way. You're going to find that there are areas where you need assistance because you don't have the expertise. Any of these starts with an infrastructure platform. You may need some help with that. As we develop an infrastructure as a service solution, you're going to get a lot of those capabilities, hopefully all of them that meet your outcomes. But maybe you find you need some help with Microsoft. Uh, Maybe you need some help with databases and analytics. Maybe you need additional help beyond the as a service solutions with cloud and automation, or you have particular outcomes that you need us to build specific types of automation into the as a service platform. You can do that. Uh, we You might need help with some legacy house built applications that need to be modernized. We have those resources as well. These are all things that you may need to may need help with. You might need help with networking. You might need help with some managed services for some legacy applications or particular subsets of applications you don't have the skills for. You may have so much going on, you need additional help with project management. You may need security assistance. You may need help with ServiceNow or whatever your process management ecosystem is. And the thing is, all of these are part of the Advisix service model. These are our core pillars of the services that we provide, and we can build into and incorporate in our as a service solutions. So as a closing thought for you today, this quote is from one of my favorite authors, John C. Maxwell, and he writes this: "Your resources are always limited. Therefore, your most important decisions are always about allocation. Allocate your resources to the people and activities that give you the greatest return on investment." When I talked before about the filling in the gap issues in an organization, even if it's your skill set, you know instinctively that it's not a focal point. If your part of your job is just to make sure that that server in the corner gets patched once a quarter, sometimes it can feel like you're just sticking a finger in the dam. It's never appreciated until the dam breaks, and then you're the one who failed. Or at least that can be the perception. It's discouraging. Since these areas are usually only noticed when they're broken, they become resistant to change. And that also means they're resistant to improvement. More importantly, every organization has limited staff. When staff are allocated to plugging the gaps, that's fewer resources that are available to focus on the exciting stuff, providing resources to the energy giving, business growing initiatives that provide visible value to your employees. At Advisix, we believe that one of the most magical benefits of as a service is that those things that are gaps in your organization can be converted to focus and growth areas for us, and both of us benefit. So my final thought is, please, let's have a discussion to see where we can help your organization pivot to an energized future where your IT staff are focused on your core business, and let us do the rest. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mitch. You want to go to that last slide so they know how to get a hold of us?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Oh, no problem. All right. Thanks, Mitch. And thank you to everyone for taking time out of your busy day to join us. Hopefully you found this information beneficial as you think about your own business outcome needs. As you consider everything you've heard today, please reach out to us so we can help you dive into how these solutions can help solve for your specific needs. Also, each of you will receive a grill box based on your selections. So please be on the lookout for those in the coming days. Thank you again, and we look forward to working with you. Have a great day.